The restless dead await. The dead shall serve.
The rules of the challenge are fairly straightforward. The only units I will be using for this run are meat wagons and necromancers. Ghouls can be recruited for harvesting lumber, but they are not allowed to attack or be used for any combat related purposes. Rule number 2. Heroes are allowed, but their usage is going to be fairly limited. So what will happen is Arthas will be allowed to act as an aura bot, and in the harder levels I'll be able to use him a little bit more freely, but even then I still will not be using his ultimate ability. Annoyingly, the first mission does not have any of the units designated for the run, so all I did in good faith was run Arthas around to pick up all the cultists hiding around the town, and once that was over, that was the level done, and now we can finally begin with the real challenge. The second mission is where the run really begins. It's divided into 2 parts. On the first section, you are given some meat wagons, ghouls and Arthas, and it is a no build section, so all you have to do is run to the end and kill everything. With the meat wagons, you cannot directly fight things, because once they get too close to a wagon, the wagon can no longer attack and has to fall back a little bit before it can fire again. What this means is that we are going to have to kite a lot this run, and what that entails is we launch some meat at the enemy, we fall back until their aggression resets, and then we do this process again and again and again until the target dies. Pretty simple for the most part, but it was also a good test to learn how aggression works in this game, and it seems like if you keep attacking, it can actually reset the mob, and it will create a new point where it walks back to. So in essence, you could actually pull any enemy to any spot on the map if you have enough determination to do so. Quite a useful little bit of tech, which will prove to be useful throughout various aspects of this run. Except in the very footage you're watching right now, where the paladin decided that he would no longer obey the rules of the AI, and just kept chasing my meat wagons till the end of the earth. Once the no build section is done, we instantly go to a part where we had to construct an undead base. This serves as a tutorial on how the race works. The unique mechanic that sets undead apart from the other races is the blighted ground. It serves 2 main purposes. Number 1, it heals your troops passively while they stand on it, and lastly, your buildings can only be placed on the blighted ground when you're playing as undead. And to show this mechanic in action, I started to build a lot of spirit towers that would defend against every single threat in this run. After a fairly long period of time, I was able to get a massive supply of meat wagons, and I set them up in a really lovely formation and I let them fire all at once. I really felt powerful, and I thought that this run was going to be a breeze. I was getting a bit too cocky, a bit too preemptively. A short while after that absolutely glorious moment, I realized a massive problem. Each time a footman got close to a wagon, it would result in a wagon dying. And it's not a very good exchange losing a whole meat wagon for 1 footman. The reason for the loss was because of the splash damage of the other meat wagons basically killing themselves. I lost so many to friendly fire that I could not really avoid. So what I ended up doing for most of the sections of this map was I stopped focusing on the footmen and I started to focus purely on the production structures, because it would result in fewer footmen coming out, which would enable me to lose fewer meat wagons hopefully. At the end of the mission you fight Uther, a very powerful paladin. Luckily it is not too difficult to fight him. You just have to attack him a few times to bait out Divine Shield, wait for it to run out, then you bombard him again. It doesn't matter how much you lose, he will die. The Off Gate spawns us directly by a base that we have to destroy. It is quite irritating when you're doing a challenge run, and the very first thing you do in a mission is take all the troops possible and move them out of the way so that they don't hit anything and technically ruin your challenge run. After destroying the base, we build our own one up, and this is where we get access to the last unit we will be using for this run, the Necromancer. This is a highly effective spellcaster who has 3 unique abilities. The main spell they use is Raise Undead, which will summon 2 skeletal warriors to fight for them. The other spell they have access to right now, Unholy Frenzy, is a good spell, but it doesn't really benefit the skeleton themed combat that we are going for, so we will not really be using it this run. One building that you will be seeing a lot of in this run is the Graveyard. What is unique about the Graveyard is that it slowly summons corpses around it, which the meat wagons can pick up to store for later usage, and the necromancers can use those corpses to summon the skeletons. And as a little extra bonus, this is the building which allows you to upgrade your troops. And very conveniently, the skeletons that I summon and the meat wagons are all on the same upgrade path, which makes it just a little bit cheaper to fully max out the value of every single unit in my army. Now I am going to show you the gimmicky fight loop that I'm going to be employing in most encounters and fights that I get into in this run. So the gist of it is as follows. I stock up on corpses in the meat wagons. Before the fight begins, I unload the corpses, and then I use the necromancers to summon them. I felt a bit stupid because only at the end of this mission did I realize that by just using the Raise Undead button, it will instantly unload them from the cart for me, which greatly reduces the amount of unnecessary clicking. Generally how the fights go is as follows. The skeletons just fight and clog up as much space as they can. The necromancers are focus firing on one unit at a time, despite their really pathetic damage numbers, and the meat wagons are the real heavy hitters. They are either going for the backline units that can do serious damage, or they are getting rid of the production structures, because when you play the campaign on hard, biggest challenge is how quickly the enemy armies resupply their troops. You are basically fighting unending waves until you destroy those buildings. Key of the 3 Moons is a mission that made me realize that the Undead Campaign really wants you to build Crypt Fiends, because there is so much air in this campaign, it is actually just unreal, and made my choice of a challenge run way harder than it should have been otherwise. To start off, we have to build our main base in a very awkward spot where half of the blight cover is going to go onto a road where we cannot build. The reason why we're building it in such an awkward spot is because we need to upgrade it as quick as possible to its tier 2 form, the Hall of the Damned, because it gains a ranged attack, and this will allow us to clear the flying units around the gold mine, because the necromancers are a horrible matchup against them, and we cannot use the crypt fiends that the game gave us. While waiting, I know there are 2 hidden troops in the trees. I decided to get rid of them because I knew that eventually from the ghouls harvesting all the lumber, they would encounter those footmen and it would create a rather awkward situation where I might have to send troops back to deal with them. By the time that the Hall of the Damned is ready, an attack wave is already in and we do not even have a gold mine. So we deal with the attack wave first, and once it is over, we can finally kite the Dragonhawk Riders into the Hall of the Damned, getting rid of them and allowing us to claim our gold mine several minutes into the run. A major issue in this mission is the gold mine we are given does not have that much gold in it, which means that I do not have infinite resources to throw at my problems. And I realized I would not be able to fight efficiently into all 3 of these bases, especially when I'm not really using Arthur's properly. The thing is, I was going to have to be smart and tackle this in a more indirect way than I would normally. So the idea is that you are on an island and you'll notice Goblin Zeppelins, which will allow you to transport troops to the other islands. It vaguely hints that you should go to the right island first, due to the goblins being that close by, and you are able to see the shore from your end. But that is not a possible solution. So instead, I decided to go to the central island, because what I could do is set up a control hub which would give me access to the wider map. By gaining this hub, it served two functions. It firstly allowed me to deal with air units, and it created that midpoint which I will be using for my cheesing operations. And secondly, this island had another gold mine on it. But we'll get onto the cheese a little bit later. So the first thing I did was actually the end of the mission. I flew Arthas and some occulties over to the last island, where they dealt with as many troops as possible. I noticed there were a few Dragonhawk riders, who, as I've already stated, are a massive counter to the necromancers. So I built up a necropolis and a few spirit towers to deal with them, and I cleared the final island out, which leaves me with a clear end goal stretch when it gets to that point. Now then, the cheese for this level is quite simple. I take a meat wagon, Arthas, and as many necromancers as the goblin zeppelins can fit, and with some clever maneuvering, I run them into a base. I drop them on the cage holding the key. I destroy the cage, pick it up with Arthas, get him out, and I rinse and repeat. But in the interludes of that, I do have to defend against some major elven attack forces. So to show the two major threats that kept coming again and again, the northwest base came with Sylvanas Windrunner, a very powerful elven ranger with a very brutal frost attack which can slow troops down, and it does a substantial amount of damage with every single auto attack. The other attack base, which the control hub was mainly used to defend against, was a mass of Dragonhawk riders. They were horrible against buildings, so just having a few could really stop an attack without much of a loss at all. I make this mission sound quick and easy, but truthfully it was long and painful and slow, and it took quite a bit of thinking and creative problem solving to get through. It really was a ramp up, and probably harder than anything I did in my previous Human Campaign challenge run. I think Arthur said it better than I ever could.
Finally. The ranger woman is starting to vex me greatly.
I need your help. I don't actually know what to do for the next two campaigns for the challenge run. So if you have any good ideas, please leave them in the comments below, and if I like them, I might just pick it up and use it for the next one. The Fall of Silvermoon was not quite as bad as the previous mission, but it did have a few irritations in the latter half of the run. So to begin with, in the beginning there's one base nearby you that occasionally sends out elven runners to send a report to Silvermoon asking for reinforcements. If you deal with them in time, the runners will not be able to deliver their report, and this is what I use Arthas for, because he was the fastest unit in my army, and his death coil ability could practically one-shot a runner. Now for the base itself, I use the same strategy I used before, where I use meat wagons, necromancers and skeletons, where I pop out a whole bunch of skeletons, send them in to smash things up and block paths, use the meat wagons on the priority targets, and the necromancers kind of exist. And that was more or less the first half of the mission done. After this, Sylvanas now makes a heroic last stand in front of the gates of Silvermoon. We end up killing her to resurrect her, to kill her once more, and hopefully keep her in the ground so that she does not do all the nonsense she did in World of Warcraft and take us to the Shadowlands. What made the last half so irritating is that several of the enemies were immune to magic damage, making the necromancers wander awkwardly into their attack range, and it did dampen a lot of the damage potential, because all of those golems would run for the meat wagons to smack them around. After that little bit, there's the base we have to take out, and that base had a lot of aerial units, so I punctured a bit of a hole into it, built a necropolis in the hole, upgraded it to a Hall of the Damned, got rid of the ranged units and cleared that out. Then, to more or less end off, There's 2 fights against the same enemies. They're very strong heroes who can do quite a substantial amount of area damage, and were fairly good at countering what my army could do. But they can only do so much by themselves, and they lost to the sheer number of troops I sent at them. Blackrock Roll gives us all the remaining upgrades for the run. The Necromancer gains access to Cripple, a very potent ability which reduces the damage of the target to nothingness and slows them down to a crawl. And the meat wagons can now launch plague-infused meat that slowly poisons enemies to death. It is very unfortunate, however, that the major antagonist of this level is both immune to magic and is a flying unit with a ridiculous amount of stats, which forced me to give my heroes a more active approach than what they have done previously throughout the challenge run. You are surrounded by orc bases and need to clear them out. So I started with the base to the west, as it was one of the weaker looking bases, and by attacking them, it would reduce the amount of possible angles of attack from the orc forces. The attack waves are nothing too serious for the most part. The big issue is that the base is downhill, and that entails that we have less vision to see the attacks, so we have to use the shades to spot them before they hit the base. The orange base from up north attacks with catapults and varied forces. The base on the east attacks with goblin sappers, who love to blow up your buildings. The only attack wave that was truly frightening was the one that the red base sent, because it would send 2 dragons at once. Generally speaking, the way to handle them was to put Icy Shield onto the occulti who was healing the base, and once in a while using Death Coil to heal them up. There was also a nasty trick where I would go and try heal the base and then immediately press stop on the occulti. That way it would try trick the dragon's aggro so they would not really fire off with a maximum efficiency. In between the bases and on the major walkways are red dragon camps, and they are constant nuisance throughout the run, because they both limit the movement potential of my army, forcing me to take longer windy routes around the map, and if I engage any enemy forces nearby, because they are not a neutral camp and are in fact part of the red faction, they will instantly get involved and start attacking me, creating a very disadvantageous situation. After I had destroyed all of the bases except for the main red one, I set up a forward camp. The goal of this camp would be to deal with red dragons while I was fighting into the base itself. After I initially peppered up the base and weakened its defenses, I got greedy. I decided to build 2 necropolises right at the top of the ramp and right in the face of that base. The idea was that I would have an instant way to deal with the dragons. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but I think this peon over here found the base as he was harvesting lumber, which caused the dragons to get angry and attack preemptively. So my greedy plan did not pay off. A big issue was the power of the red dragons. It's one thing when they come into our base and run into the towers, but fighting into them directly is another game altogether. So I took a bit of a risk and went all in on a single gambit. I would destroy the red dragon shrine. It took a drastic amount of sacrifice to get through and break it, but luckily that base could not rebuild the shrine, which allowed me to finish off the remaining dragons and then handle the base in the same manner as every other base in this mission. The Siege of Dalaran felt like such a refresher after the hole that had been most of the missions in this run. The enemy does not constantly pump out units, allowing you to push up fairly quickly. The only irritation is that there is not a forward spot to build a base. So, once in a while, I would have to go back home to refuel on corpses. The goal of the mission is to defeat the Archmagi, which will hurt any non-mechanical undead unit, which makes the meat wagon a pretty potent weapon that it can walk into this field without taking damage. For the first Magi, I just constantly kite him with the meat wagons and slowly whittle down his health to nothingness. For the second one, I use the exact same idea because I'm very original. Then the second last magi posed the biggest challenge of the run, but I came up with a very nasty cheese to get him. So, as we explained earlier about leash ranges, normally allowing you to pull an enemy out, well with this one, they thought smart and decided that he would have almost no leash range, which allowed me to put some catapults on the left hand side of him and slowly but surely peppered him down. Any of the water elementals and illusions he sent were blown to smithereens, and that is how I got him. If I was to fight him fair and square, it would have been quite a difficult fight, but luckily there's nothing in the rules saying we have to do that. The very last mage really did me dirty. He wasn't much of a challenge at all, even though he did have many minions around him, as you could just focus all your damage on him and blow him up in half a second. What really irritated me was that he summoned both of my heroes right into the fight with him. I did not need their assistance one bit, so I desperately tried to get them out. However, with the sheer mass of skeletons, that proved to be oddly difficult to do. And at last, the final mission of the run, Under the Burning Sky. It has a very simple premise. We have to hold out for 30 minutes, so that Kolthuzad can summon Archimonde, one of the most powerful demons of the Burning Legion. This one took several attempts. On the first one, I built spirit towers around the main ramps leading up to Kolthuzad. But because of that bugged push that comes at the 1 minute 30 mark, it didn't hold out nearly long enough. So I decided to redo the mission with a different strategy in mind. The reason why I opted to use Halls of the Dead over Spirit Towers was due to the fact that the Halls of the Dead had a much larger health pool and they did comparable damage to 2 towers. This made them way more durable and resulted in me having to deal with less repairing all around. Another thing I did is, instead of putting them directly in front of the ramps, I put them on the diagonals. That way it gave me more fighting space for the skeletons, and it allowed me to slightly veer the enemy units off course, which would buy me precious seconds in that final push. Let me break this down into the major tasks that I had to complete during this run. The first problem was the initial attack wave that comes for your base. It's not a very threatening force, and in a normal campaign you could just gather all of your troops and run down those attackers. But I have almost no units to start with, and it created a massive issue. On my first attempt, I did do it without Arthurs, but it was so janky and I was constantly on the back foot because of it that it just resulted in a really poor run. So instead I opted to get the goblin landmines on the western side of the map to soften up the first attack. After that, you're mainly holding out against 3 fairly similar attacks with just increasing intensity as the mission goes on. The western base proved to be one of the more irritating ones, as they would attack you with mortar teams and siege tanks. They were really proficient at taking down buildings, and normally with the defense, most of the meat wagons had to reside there to deal with those tanks and mortar teams. The blue base would send out mainly Griffin Riders and sometimes a supplementary force along with them. The Necromancer's final upgrade cripple was fantastic here, as it turned them into big and slow target dummies that would slowly but surely die. One issue though with the Griffin Riders is that they are a combination of the worst aspects of the Dragon Hawks and the Red Dragons in the previous missions. They come in a large bulk, making you use several casts of cripple, which is quite an expensive spell to bring them down, and they also have really high stats, sort of similar to the Red Dragons. The East would attack with a very well-rounded composition of knights, dwarven riflemen, and healers. This gave them good stats but luckily the necromancers summoning a whole bunch of skeletons could easily overrun them for the most part. One thing I was not happy about with my attempt at this was that I felt like I had too many meat wagons. Their splash is appreciated, but for this mission I feel like oftentimes they were doing more friendly fire than they were doing damage to the enemies. I think if I was to repeat this run, I would definitely add more graveyards and stick to necromancers, as I feel their general purpose utility was substantially better than the splash damage of the meat wagons. At 1 minute 30, the final attack wave is coming, and the number of enemies is genuinely frightening. I do all that I can to stop them. I summon as many skeletons as possible. I move the meat wagons to surround Kolthuzad to buy any seconds they can, and also to not splash down the skeletons and buildings. And I cast Cripple on all of the Griffin Riders to hopefully stop that massive force from just wreaking havoc on everything. And the time is ticking down, just a few seconds left, and are we going to make it? No. With literally 1 second left, we failed on this attempt. So I loaded up another save and tried again. This time, I preemptively used Raise Dead and sent all of the skeletons to stall the enemies as long as possible. Then, when that wave of skeletons died and the enemy got close, I summoned yet another wave. And this time, I was really prepared. I even used an item on Arthas and transferred it to Kolthuzad to give him more armor to make him survive longer. Surprisingly, it was not needed, and I was able to succeed with a few seconds to spare and my safety net still in place. Thank you for making it all the way through to the end of the video. I hope you had some fun watching me suffer through this challenge, and I definitely recommend giving this one a go. It's certainly a very unique challenge, utilizing one of the coolest aspects of the Undead army. If you can, please show me your support by dropping a like, subscribe, and maybe a comment if you feel up to it. Thanks again, this has been Safiro, and until the next challenge run, bye bye.